Hey, my name is Xuan,
My name's Angie Chu.
and we're so glad to be launching the Chewonit podcast. Now, just a disclaimer: this podcast it's not for the faint-hearted, right? We're gonna be diving into pretty controversial topics and keeping things as real as we can. Okay, so basically, Chewonit will be a podcast where we delve into the mental health issues faced by youths and adults today. So let's chew on it.
Sounds like the name of this podcast is a play on my surname.
Yep, that's exactly where we want to go.
This is a production by Brahm Centre, a charity here in Singapore promoting happier and healthier living.
Now it's been a week, right, since our debut episode. Of course, we spoke about one of the hottest topics, right, amongst us, the young people, hustle culture, right? And the reaction's been overwhelming. So really thank you so much for your support. Now, before we get on to our other topics, by the way, we've got a total of 10 really hot, really exciting topics planned that we're gonna be talking about over the next 10 weeks. But for now, I thought, why not let's get to know my co-host a bit better, right? So this episode, it's gonna be a special one. You're probably thinking, who is this woman, right? Why should I listen to her? Today we're gonna get to know Singapore's biggest mental health personality. She is someone who, from my experience, she says it like it is, no host barred. The Straits Times Singaporean of the Year 2019, my co-host, CEO and founder of Brahm Centre, Adjunct Associate Professor Angie Chu. How are you, Angie? What's going on?
I'm good, thanks, Xuan. Except that this morning I tripped and fell.
Ayo, what happened?
Well, I woke up and I was just preparing to get myself dressed, and my little puppy, who is 6 months old, her name is Cookie, and she came into my room. She actually sneaked in. And so before, she could pee on my carpet, I quickly picked her up and tried to get her out of my room, and I tripped over and fell. So,
Oh no. Are you doing well now? Is everything okay?
yeah, I think I got a couple of bruises, but other than that, I'm good. And anyway, let's not catastrophize. I'm just glad that there was nothing serious.
Yeah. That's the most important. And I'm so glad you're able to, join us today. And, so honored to have you as part of this podcast project that we're doing.
I'm excited to be here.
This podcast, we're going to be touching on the difficult topics, right? We've got an episode on depression and suicide. We've got one on managing healthy relationships. We just finished one on hustle culture. Angie, you're divorced, right? You've gone through a really dark patch in your life, including suffering from panic attacks and depression. So what can our listeners expect from this podcast?
You're going to be hearing stories which are fun, which have a dark side, and stories which you may not expect to be told. A lot of times, people do hear about people's success stories, and there's also much to learn from people's stories which come from a darker place, as shame does bring about a sense of negativity, and when people are in that space, sometimes it's really hard to get out of it. So having gone through a very dark patch in my life, I'm happy to share the stories. And perhaps some people may find some of the things that I share to be helpful and even possibly inspiring.
Okay, I believe everything happens in people's lives for a reason. Do you think that had you not gone through all those dark moments in your life that you'd be so involved in the mental health space today? Would you feel you'd be where you are today if not for all that?
I personally don't believe that things happen for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have to make the best of every situation, because if not, we can be very fatalistic. We think that, everything is fated. Then it's like we're not going to take initiative. We're not really going to look at the silver linings of the clouds that come upon us. So at the end of the day, we have a choice, and it's realizing that we have a choice that makes the difference between someone who becomes bitter after a very pleasant episode in their lives or they come out better. Just as when we're successful, is to enjoy the success. But when things don't go well, there's still a silver lining. And it's to focus on that silver lining so we can actually make something positive about it.
And sort of learn from our mistakes, right? And move on.
Yeah, the best pianist, the best artists didn't perform the best on the first day. They have messed up many, many times in their practice before they come out with some superb performance or some beautiful art. So I think that life is like a piece of art. We have to try, we have to explore, we have to go beyond our comfort zone and extend our boundaries, be prepared for things to go wrong. And that is the tapestry of life that we come out beautiful.
I'm so glad you brought up this part about, having to go through these dark moments in your life for you to come out stronger, because our next episode is on resilience, right? Which I'm really, really excited to talk about. And but more of that next week. For now, let's get back to this podcast, and we've called this podcast Chew On It. Right, pun intended, by the way. Growing up, was there an incident in your life when you really had to chew on something?
Yes. My dad certainly left a deep impression on my life because he was a father that was very supportive, and the fact that he believed in me as a child, that I could do what I believe I was able to achieve. And that is huge. We're talking about 40 years ago, where not every girl had an opportunity to go for higher education. And to him, giving me higher education was the best gift, not financial inheritance. And having the education meant that I could be financially independent and make my decisions and choose the life that I wanted to live.
Angie, we see you as this, mindfulness figure or guru at conferences, retreats, classes, and basically every time you're in the public eye. I mean, at work, I also see this tough side of you, right? As a boss, does that go against mindfulness attitudes of, for example, say kindness?
Not at all. There's a misconception that people who are mindful ends up being very soft and even end up being a doormat and being taken advantage of. It is not the case. The tough side of me, it's consistent of being kind, because kindness is not always targeted at just one person. When sometimes bosses are kind to one person, they end up being unkind to the rest.
Like how?
For example, if there's a particular staff that doesn't or not able to do his job according to the job scope that's required, and in being kind to this person, other people will have to end up taking the additional tasks that this person can't perform. So does that mean that that person, that boss is being kind? Not the case, right? Because actually the boss is actually being unkind to the rest by being kind to just one person.
So what you're implying is that you look at the big picture and how mindfulness has helped you look at that big picture, and rather than focus on small little individuals, you practice kindness to a bigger community.
Absolutely. Being kind has to take in consideration the people who are impacted by a decision. And that includes a decision that has been taken to hire someone to do a certain job and not being able to do it well. As a boss, I have to address it because I'm also being unkind to this person by giving the person a job scope that is bigger than what he's able to fulfill.
And I'm so glad you brought up this as a misconception, because I mean, it's something that's been lingering in my mind for a while. I mean, you have to be tough at times, as a boss, especially to make the important decisions, for the company to grow. But at the same time, there's that mindset that's holding you back, that you have to be kind to all, but sometimes you don't. It's not about you have to look at the bigger picture, right? It's not about being kind to each and every one person.
Yeah, an example would be if you see a person hitting another one, are you not going to step in to try to stop that abuse? One has to be tough and to be able to go in there and stop that incident from continuing. So it's not about being a doormat. It's not about being passive. It's not about being bo-chup. In fact, being mindful is to be aware of what is happening and to make a decision that is the most helpful instead of solving one problem and creating another.
Angie, since we're on that topic, I don't think many know this, but you were sort of like my hero, right? Back then when I was in the army, just last year, you sort of brought to attention the fact that, I was dealing with a very toxic boss at work. I was, in a very toxic work environment. And you actually called the NS hotline.
Exactly. So, how can I just sit back and not do something to help you because you were in a very bad place and you didn't have enough confidence to call the hotline yourself?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, which is quite normal. So I stepped in and called the hotline. But I also have a lot of compassion for the person who was being very mean to you because I see that person as being a very unhappy person and perhaps very insecure. Basically, bullies or people who bully someone else has a lot of issues themselves.
Would you say that most bullies might have been bullied when they were younger and they sort of have to, resort to that to sort of prove themselves otherwise that, they were not victims in the past?
It could be, or it could be that the person is just a very unhappy person. Not having a lot of happiness or fulfillment or even appreciation by others. And because of that sense of lack of worthiness, feels that, the whole world is horrible. And then he or she behaves that way because he or she believes the world is horrible. So their natural way of acting is being horrible.
Were you ever bullied at your workplace in the past?
Yes, I have. And maybe that's why I had a lot of compassion for you and I wanted to stand up for you. Because I wish I had someone who stood up for me.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, I had a boss who would be shouting and screaming and sometimes showing disrespect towards me in front of my staff. And that's when I started to develop anxiety. And I didn't even know at that time I was starting to suffer from anxiety. And eventually, when other things started going wrong in my life, it went into a full-blown anxiety attack. So bullying is very harmful to mental health. And it affects how our body reacts. And that's when the body seizes due to the muscle tightening, the constrictions, the heart palpitating, and feeling like there's a blank out in the mind. So looking back, I could tell my boss was feeling insecure and she was in a very unhappy place. And therefore, she took it out on me.
So would you say your, all these struggles, anxiety, depression, did it all start from that place?
I think there's a whole series of events. So when a few things go wrong in our life and it culminates to something much bigger, it's almost like, a volcano building up. And I think that's what happened sometime in 2010, 2011 in my life.
Now, Angie, many of us know you as the Straits Times Singaporean of the year 2019, for your contributions and the mental health community and, of course, in supporting the elderly as well. And you've called the award a real win for mental health. Has there ever been a time in your life when you didn't find meaning in the work you were doing?
There was a time when I didn't find meaning in the work that I was doing. And that was the moment that I realized I needed to change, to find a new job. And actually, that's when I quit the corporate world. I recall sitting in front of my computer and I was typing an email and I thought, okay, I get paid $1,000 for today's work, but somebody else could be doing this job. And I didn't like the fact that I was a solo performer and I didn't have a team to lead. So I know that I wasn't actually adding value or grooming people that I love doing. I wasn't interested in just earning the money because, as you know, there are a lot of people with a lot of money, but it doesn't mean that they find meaning in their life, nor do they feel happy. So that's when I decided that I was going to quit and do something more meaningful with my life so that I don't end up wasting my time, because we all have limited time. And time is something that we can't buy back no matter how much money we have.
And going back to the award, what do you mean by a real win for mental health?
When I suffered from anxiety attacks and depression, I didn't even know what was happening because there was so little talked about with regards to mental health. So highlighting mental health helped to destigmatize mental issues and problems and enables people to seek help. And I can see that tide has changed. People are more willing to talk about anxiety, depression, and other mental health problems, including yourself being so open about it. I mean, I think this is a fantastic thing. And I also recognize that there's an anxiety pandemic in the making, and people are able to seek help and to talk about it openly. This is a real win for mental health.
What's an anxiety pandemic?
I see so many people suffering from anxiety, and including young people.
During the COVID-19 pandemic?
I think it has worsened, partly contributed by COVID-19, as people were living in greater level of fear, and people didn't see a very bright future ahead. They had no idea when this pandemic was going to end, what was going to become of their jobs, whether the jobs would still be able to hold beyond the pandemic. Businesses were closing. So, and what's going to happen to the kids? They were all doing home learning. Will they develop social skills? Will they have the ability to go back into some normal classroom life? So all these things that play in their mind is what gives rise to anxiety. And when we don't have them in check, we end up causing the people that we influence, and if we're parents, it affects the kids a lot.
Okay, going back to the title of this episode, we've called this special pilot episode, The Unconventional Angie Chu. Do you think that for someone to be successful in, their own in their own way or in their own right, you've got to be sort of unconventional in a way to, get or achieve what you want in life?
Being unconventional means that you don't always have to follow the norm. And I see myself as an entrepreneur. In fact, I was an entrepreneur when I was 25 in the software space. And it's actually believing in what you can do and just going out and do it rather than fearing that it's going to fail. When we don't do something because we think it's going to fail, well, guess what? We've never even had a chance to try it. So, being unconventional is what gives rise to creativity, to new ways of doing things, to be inventive. So those of you who have a dream of trying something else, trying something new, go for it.
But we're so conditioned, when we're young to not fail and try to be perfect and try to always, achieve and, aim for the stars and all that. How would someone like that change their mindset to, to something more like yours, where you're not afraid to take risks and you just put yourself out there?
There's nothing wrong in conforming. There's nothing wrong in being unconventional or being conventional. I think it really is about whether you have it inside you to want to try something different. If you do, go for it. And if you don't, that's okay. Don't make that into a mental health issue.
And I guess that is it, our special pilot episode of the Chewonit podcast. Of course, Chewonit is a production by Brahm Centre Singapore, And don't forget to follow them on their socials at Brahm Centre Singapore on Facebook and at Brahm Centre SG on Instagram. Now, they are celebrating their 10th anniversary this year, and they're also the host of the Asia-Pacific Mindfulness Conference 2022. More details on the website at www.brahmcentre.com. Can't wait for our next episode. We're gonna be talking about resilience, especially among the youth. You don't want to miss out on that. Before we go, please subscribe to our show and share it with your family, your friends, your pets, whoever you think will benefit from this podcast. This has been Xuan, she's Angie, and we'll talk to you soon.